So anyway, I mean, I think you make some valid points there. I mean, oftentimes, you hear about, basically, maximizing shareholder value and increasing the stock price. You can look at a lot of fundamental, business or media business books and things, and it'll, talk about those things. Of course, he's saying, that, again, having those appropriate goals and thinking about the consumer, and I think that's one of the key things, being consumer centric. And what was kind of the other main thing to kind of tie in with that, with consumers that he mentions? Yes.
Is it being unique and being different?
Right, exactly, being unique and different. And that can be a tough thing because we see a lot of copying, certainly in the media industry, right? And we see lots of clone programs but it makes sense, I mean, in a lot of ways, because media companies oftentimes are trying to reduce risk. So one way to reduce risk is that you use a formula that works, right? And you look at, a program, and it's worked. I mean, some programs it's worked really well, other programs, oftentimes it doesn't work so well. But I think he makes a good point to try to break out of the box and try to do something unique and that maybe hasn't been done before, or something that is a big departure from what the original company was doing. But we do see some success stories. I mean, I think you can say for instance, the Voice, the TV show, getting, I think a lot of the ideas certainly from maybe American Idol, right? But they made it different enough that certainly it's done well, and it's got to establish its own audience. And of course, over time, American Idol, the numbers did go down, but it was phenomenally successful for a long time. And of course, you can look at the longevity of the program, the fact that, again, it started in 2000, the fact that it's still going. And we know Survivor, for instance, that program, right? I mean, there's another season getting ready to start up, it also started in 2000. There's other programs that have tried to emulate that. Temptation Island is one that I kind of remember, kind of cheesy show, but by Fox a long time ago. It did last for a little while. It was kind of interesting program for sure. But, some of these fall by the wayside relatively quickly. Some never end up making it on the air. I mean, they're produced, right, and they're not ever picked up. Sometimes they get an opportunity as a mid-season replacement. We see that kind of thing. But we know certainly in television it's very competitive, particularly when you're looking at, competing on the major broadcast networks or even cable networks, to find something that works. And we know so many programs, right, and maybe this has happened to us where many programs maybe we start getting into early on, we think it's pretty cool, we like the concept, but then next thing you know, it's off the air. And, in today's world, it's so competitive that a lot of media companies and media programmers, I think, still kind of pull the plug a little earlier than they should. But the way they look at it is they feel like that's a smart business move. Instead of having average ratings over time, they feel like, okay, let's go ahead and pull it. Maybe the ratings could improve, but after 4 or 5 weeks, they're usually pretty impatient now. And they say, okay, we've got this other program on the shelf that we can bring in. And sometimes the other program does really well, but other times they don't always make the right decision. And sometimes, though, too, we see where programs are pulled off the air and then the fan base reacts so strongly that all of a sudden, and then the programs aren't coming back, or maybe the DVD box sets are provided and then later it goes back on the air. Can you think of any examples of where that's happened, where something's been pulled, but then there's an uproar with fans? Yes?
Right now, View on Netflix is really doing well, but it's starting off on Lifetime. Doing so well there.
Right, yeah. And sometimes it's just not the right fit. Sometimes it's not the right network because, certain networks, again, they try to appeal to certain demographics. And yes, people have remote controls and there's lots of content out there, but there still is some evidence to show, and research will show this today, that people oftentimes, though, if they like a certain network, they'll oftentimes, stick with that network, and they might sample new shows because simply the show comes on after the show that they've been watching, especially maybe if they're watching with other people, and it kind of rolls on the next show, and you're thinking, okay, this is actually not bad, and the next thing you know, you're become a fan. I don't know. It does sometimes happen. Yes? Yeah.
Also on Netflix, Sense8 was like a really popular show, and then they canceled it, and there was like a ton of like backlash, so they brought it back for like a 2-hour finale, and like wrapped everything up in. So,
yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, sometimes that happens. Sometimes they'll do something different. Like you said, they might make the finale out of it or have some kind of special. There'll be some kind of maybe thing that, you know, differentiates it from the initial content, but still it's really the same program, same characters and storyline. So, yes.
I know one that everyone talked about was the Brooklyn Nine-Nine one.
Oh, right.
And then it's from Fox and then it's from Fox.
Right, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Yeah, that's one example that that's in my mind as I'm asking that question. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, yeah, you can have programs, again, they go from one network and get bought out by another, and then they can do really, really well. And of course, then that has the first network, oftentimes the network that actually produced it, not always, but actually produced it, really get ticked off, but, you know, that they made that decision. But hey, you know, that's the way it goes sometimes. You know, yes.
As I say, Family Guy.
Yeah, Family Guy, right? Yeah, that was the big one. Yeah,
The
Family
DVD
Guy.
sales were crazy, and
Right, they pulled off the air, I think after a couple of seasons, right? After 2 or 3 seasons in the early 2000s, DVD sales were just off the chain. It was just insane. And yeah, there was a big uproar. People really wanted it back. And then here it is now, and it really running strong. You know, whether you like, you know, Seth MacFarlane's type of humor or not, the program has done really well. I mean, personally, I do kind of like watching it occasionally. To me, sometimes it's when I really want to relax. I don't really want to think much at all. That's like, I kind of can appreciate a few episodes of Family Guy, but it's done really well. Obviously, you look at the longevity, and if you look at the ratings, week in, week out, in terms of, you know, in terms of scripted content or that's not special sports related, things like that, it consistently is in that top 25 for cable.
Oh, why
Great,
did that
and
happen?
broadcast. I'm sorry, what's
Why
that?
did happen? Like, why, if the show doesn't do well on one network, and it does well on another one, how come that happens? Is like people don't have access to the signals, or what is it?
You know, there's a lot of factors, but certainly that's one of them. I mean, if it's a major broadcast network, those are pretty much in all of our
Yeah,
210 TV markets that we'll talk about here in a little bit. Some of the cable networks, though, there is some differentiation there. I mean, there's some cable systems that only carry certain networks, and it's more limited in scope than others. I mean, some of the smaller cable systems don't carry a lot of the networks. I mean, I think in LA, I mean, I have Spectrum Cable, at least for now, and they have a pretty broad selection of networks, but some cable systems don't do as well. But like I was mentioning before, sometimes, though, it comes down to the other programs surrounding that show, and I was saying there is what they kind of call audience flow, which you probably talk about this in media programming class. Before 81, I've taught that network programming practices. I've taught that once, but I taught it at University of Florida when I was there as a very similar type of class. But we talk a lot about that, though. Even in today's world, even remote controls and all these other things we can go to, there is something to be said for audience flow, meaning that someone could tune, you know, be watching a program and then they just decide, you know, they catch the first few minutes of the next program and they decide, okay, you know what, I'm gonna, you know, stick around and watch the whole program, and they end up saying, this is actually pretty cool. Maybe I'll keep watching. You know, or the program before. Sometimes, you know, you tune in a little bit early for your show again, and this is more in linear television. Again, not as much with online content. I know most of you are probably watching more online content, but for a lot of people, those kind of things can factor in. And I'll say with myself, there are certain shows that I started watching because of other programs, like the Goldbergs. I watched that some basically because I was watching Modern Family, and it was adjacent to Modern Family. And I don't know, I kind of appreciate the Goldbergs because essentially I grew up in, you know, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and they're, I think, in Philadelphia, and they're kind of like, kind of my era. It was like the 80s, you know, growing up, and it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of reminds me of my childhood or something. So, I don't know. I obviously, there's a lot of other factors that why people like certain things. But any other, was another hand up for you? All right, so, oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Oh, it's okay. I was gonna say the Mindy Project, I think it went from Fox to Hulu.
Fox to Hulu, right.
And then on Hulu you could binge watch it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's true. Yeah, and I think, yeah, there are a lot of programs, and a lot of times the audience would prefer that very much. You know, particularly if you're looking for your younger demographic, I think it's almost understood. And I think a program, I mean, I'm not as familiar with Mini Project. I mean, I've seen a few clips of it. I don't know it that well. I could appreciate the lead, though. I think she's great. But yeah, I think a program like that, I think going from like a linear type of deal where you only see it once a week to then going to where you can binge watch it. is a good way to go, certainly. And, of course, there's a lot of, talk today, too, with stream providers of, how exactly, what's the right formula, too, for certain shows in terms of release. Do you release them, the day after, if it's something also airs on the network, do you release it the day after, or do you release, the entire season at once, which has been done a lot by Netflix, or do you go into more of a, and some stream providers say, oh, maybe we want to do more like traditional television and release on a weekly basis because they feel like maybe that'll develop some desire to watch the program more and just some anticipation is the word I'm thinking of leading up to that. But there's some people that doesn't work for. So, so this guy, Michael Porter, good examples, by the way, comes up with these 5 forces. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you this on exam, by the way, what these are, but I might ask you, though, I will ask you, actually, who is, when it comes to strategic management, who is the major scholar, and I might have some different names. Do you want to remember Michael Porter? But he kind of comes up with this, this little chart down here, talking about these 5 forces. And, it definitely has a lot of relevance, certainly with a class and really any kind of industry. But you look here, for instance, threat of new entry. That's all about, how easy is it for somebody else to step in to the game and to step into your business and do what you're doing, right? So, that's all about, basically, how easy is it to get into that game. Now, if you're talking about developing a website and having some content out there, well, that's a pretty low barrier to entry. We can all do that pretty much, right? So, but what this is talking about is there's certain things that can make the, if you're already in an industry, can kind of help protect you, for instance. So if it's very expensive or it takes a lot of money, it's very expensive or it takes a lot of time to be able to start doing what you're doing, that can be something that can work in your favor. Economies of scale, I mentioned it briefly with Walmart, for instance, in certain cases, because you can get, these quantity discounts. So if you can buy just tons of, things in bulk, that you can save money that way. Technology protection, maybe you have some technology, maybe you have a patent on technology, so no one else can really quite do exactly what you're doing. Maybe that can kind of protect you. One thing that has kind of led, that has really helped, for instance, the cable television industry out in a lot of ways, although their power is slipping a lot because of online distribution, because of people tired of paying higher bills for content. But one thing that's worked for them for a long time is that they have had their very high barriers to entry to get into that business. The reason being, to get into cable television, you have to be able to, if you think about how it works, you're basically running cables through neighborhoods, and they're all set up like in this massive network, and it takes a lot of money to be able to do that. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of people to be able to go and do that, and you have to get the approval of local city governments to allow you to go into neighborhoods and dig up the ground. And generally speaking, people don't like their neighborhoods dug up. But anyway, that's one thing that's kind of helped them. So threat of new entry, competitive rivalry. Basically, with that is, how many competitors do you have? How good are the competitors? What are some of the quality differences you might have? Switching costs and customer loyalty. Switching costs just means how much is it going to cost a consumer to go from your product to another. If there's not much of a cost, then they're much more likely to say, screw your company, I'm going to go elsewhere because I can get maybe a little better deal over there. And so what is that involved there? Like I said, quality differences being one. There's what we call buyer power. Buyer power is basically, you have, it depends on if you have a variety of different buyers, a variety of different types of people, or companies that buy from you, especially if you're business to business, then you're going to have more power, and you're going to feel a little bit safer because you have more variety of customers. So if you lose one customer, maybe you've got 200-300 others over here, or thousands of other customers. You don't have to worry about it if you lose one or two. So that's a big thing. And a lot of it is, looking at the ability to substitute. If you're offering a product or service, can somebody easily find a substitute for what you do? So if you're a production company in LA, how easily can they find another production company that can do what you can do? And maybe they can't, because maybe you're extremely good at what you do. Maybe you have great equipment, you have great writers, and you have people that are excellent editors and excellent camera operators and all that kind of stuff. But those are some things you have to think about. There's also supplier power. This also means that if you rely on only one or two suppliers, that they have power over you, meaning that all of a sudden, if you're working in one big, company, certainly when it comes to equipment, is B&H Video, for instance. I'm sure you're familiar with them. So a lot of companies, in media, oftentimes, use them as a predominant supplier of equipment. They have great equipment, and they seem to have good customer service. But one of the things about it is if all of a sudden they decide to jack their prices up double, and you've been going to them, and you don't really have another option already on the table, somebody you're already working with, that you're familiar with, then you might be more likely to just sort of say, okay, well, if doubling it is pretty extreme, but say even they go up by 10% in price, you're not going to be happy about having to pay more for your 4K cameras or your mics or whatever, but you just kind of say, well, I've been doing business with them for a long time. I know where else I can go, where I can get the same quality and all of that. So that's power there. And then threat of substitution, again, kind of ties in with the buyer power thing. Just, can people easily just decide, okay, I'm going to substitute your product and go elsewhere because they feel like they can get the same thing somewhere else. And that's where it's really important. And I think one key thing within media, particularly looking at the success of Netflix and looking at the original programs, and part of the reason why these companies are so driven now to just pump out as much original content is because of this threat of substitution. If they have exclusive content, exclusive stuff that people can't go anywhere else for, then that right there is a big thing, right? Look at Netflix and some of the things that they've done. Look at a series like Stranger Things, for instance. You can't, you're not going to get that anywhere else. You're not going to find that on broadcast TV. You're not going to find it other places, and you name it. There's of course a lot of really successful series now. That's a big thing within media is having that content that people can't get anywhere else, because if you have that, maybe you have a lot of other content that people can get elsewhere, but the fact that you've got some of that original thing, that really keeps people home, particularly, and keeping them with you, and particularly if your rates are relatively low. We know right now those streaming providers, at least the big three, Hulu, Netflix, and Amazon, are pretty close, pretty similar in price points. They have some differences. And of course, Hulu's got options with ads, without, that kind of thing. So anyway, like I said, I'm not going to ask you about this chart here, so don't worry about it. But it is, I think, an important thing to go over. All right, just a couple more things. We're almost wrapped up with this chapter. So strategic planning is part of strategic management. Just the fact that you might think about those 5 forces and you're thinking about what's going on internally, or what the opportunities are internally, but then also externally, what's going on, where you're anticipating what the threats are, you're anticipating what the consumer trends are going to be, and maybe you can capitalize on the trends, or if the trends are going to hurt you, you figure out a strategy that allows you to get around those. And companies that can do that really well are going to do great. Other ones won't do so well. Blockbuster, for instance, did not do so well in trying to, when everybody went to streaming of content, digital distribution, they didn't believe that was really going to last. They didn't believe it really had potential. But they didn't look at what the numbers were. They didn't see just how fast that was growing. And then by the time they decided to do it, it was everyone knew Netflix, and that was always top of people's mind when it came to that it was game over. And we see that happen in other cases, but that's one example, very, very clear example of that occurring. All right, so we talked about internal and external. Okay, then lastly, leadership. And leadership, we talked about this in chapter 1, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Does anybody know who's pictured there? By any chance? Right, FDR, yeah. FDR, so there's really 2 different types of leaders, and you may have read this other places as well, is this book, and talking about it now, but we have transactional and transformational type of leaders, 2 different kinds. Do you think, from what you know about FDR from history or other research that you've done, maybe documentaries you watched, do you think he was more transactional or transformational, you think? Or should I explain first the difference between those 2 terms? Oh yeah, sure. That would make sense. All right. Transactional just basically means that you are people are motivated by rewards as well as punishment. It kind of, in some ways, sounds a little bit like the classical school. A little bit it's saying that that you give people tasks, again, they do a good job, you congratulate them, say great job, or if they don't, then maybe not such a good job, or maybe it comes down to some other punitive type of thing that, if they don't hit a certain revenue number or something by a certain date, they can be, threatened to be let go from the company, things like that, or if they achieve that maybe they're going to get a raise, or some kind of bonus, so that kind of thing. So transactional, though, is really based on, this is, again, more of the theory X as well. Remember we talked about X, Y, and Z. It's more based on chain of command, and it's more based on transactions. It's more based on, if you're a manager, and we've talked about different types of managers, right, last week, that, you have managers that are real task-oriented, where they're not as much about the motivation part and making people feel good about being there, but they're really good about saying, okay, we've got a list of 10 different things we need to get done. I want you to do this and that. A lot of times they're smaller tasks, but of course they need to be done appropriately to get to the bigger goals. And that's kind of transactional. Transformational involves vision and passion. And one of the key parts about it is that the people underneath this person, whether they're a U.S. president or they're a manager at really any level of management, low, mid, or upper level, the fact is this person has vision and passion, and they're able to communicate that, and most importantly, though, they're able to get people to buy into it. They get people to believe in that vision and passion, and believe that it's best for the organization. Maybe they believe part of that maybe is best for them as individuals, and they believe that this person is going to be able to deliver that. Again, versus this, which is more like, okay, here's the task at hand. You do it great, you get a reward. If you don't, you might get punished. This goes, again, based on getting people to so it's really important, though, certainly, to be a transformational leader, to, again, get people to buy into your vision, and in general, be good at expressing yourself, and really having some natural ability to motivate people. So anyway, kind of to go back to that question about FDR, which one of these do you think that he may have fell under?
I would say maybe transformational.
Okay.
I mean, this leader during a dark time.
Right.
Going through economic depression. So I don't know much, maybe because I know he was on the radio and encouraging people to stay hopeful for the future.
Right.
So I would say transformational is more
Mm-hmm.
a vision.
Okay, good. Yeah, and I think you can look at, the fireside chats that he did on the radio regularly, and the fact that, it was a dark time, and people were fearful. I mean, the depression was from everything that I've read, and even talking to my grandparents who passed away now, living through it and hearing those stories, pretty devastating. And the fact is, he was willing to kind of calm the nation a little bit, and of course that's part of the reason why I did these fireside chats, and he really was very effective using the radio. And of course, we know later, other presidents have been really effective using television. Like JFK, for instance, was considered then, considered very, very good on, in front of the camera, and very charismatic, and they felt like, okay, and the era too of the time, of course, you consider that. Good. So yes.
So is there a form of leadership that involves assuming people are motivated by reward as well as punishment, and using that as an advantage to your vision and passion, like kind of like mixing them both?
Mixing them both. I think you could have a hybrid of that, certainly.
I know it's situational, but I'm asking, is there like a transactional, transformational, like a form?
I mean, from what I understand, there's not technically or by like textbook that there's really a merging of the two, at least that I've seen or read about. But I think it's certainly possible, because I don't believe that every concept we ever look at is completely isolated and set in stone, because I believe there's always gray area with pretty much everything. and or most things. So I would think that, yeah, there could be that. But I'm just saying, I haven't read technically, see anything in textbooks that said, okay, there's maybe this third option. Because I know, like last week, we talked about, you know, X and Y, and you had Z come along with the two. Not that I have. I don't know. Has anyone come across that, or I don't know if you've taken like a general management course before, or done just an outside reading, come across anything that might be like a combination of the two?
Maybe a little bit.
There you go. Book idea. Exactly.
Yes, at the retail level,
Okay.
I would see it a lot. I was,
Mhm.
well, I mean, being that I was like a supervisor and stuff like that, I would see like even upper management and stuff, assume people were motivated by rewards and punishment, but then there's also their mission statement and what their passion and stuff, so it's kind of like, it seems like they clash a little bit in the retail level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there is that. Yeah, I've seen that at the retail level. I mean, I've worked at retail level years back, and yeah, I've seen that some. I've seen it even kind of working at kind of the, I guess, wholesale level, or you know, as well with business and stuff. But yeah, you can definitely see, you know, some managers, some people that might be able to kind of bring these together. Other times it seems like, okay, it's very much kind of one or the other. Sort of. Good. Okay. Good. So that is essentially that. Well, yeah. So one of the key things about this is the last point is I kind of mentioned before that these people tend to be kind of naturally good salespeople in terms of selling their ideas, and then because part of sales is to get other people to believe in your vision and what you want to do. So I'm sorry, your name again?
Jose?
Jose? Okay, thanks. Yeah, so certainly, again, FDR, again, most scholars, presidential scholars and others, management theorists would, you know, look at him, consider him a transformational leader. Again, it's not to say that maybe there's certain things that he did more on a transactional level, but it's kind of interesting though. You know, if you read about, you know, in some management books, they'll go into different presidents that we've had in some more recent time, and kind of look at, you know, what type of leader are they, and there's kind of other categories and things like that. It's kind of interesting to read that, regardless of kind of where you fall, you know, politically on the scale. So. Anyway, so sorry I pulled you away from State of the Union address tonight, but anyway, guess you can always watch it online later, if you wanted, certainly. Or maybe just, what's that?
Get the gist of it later.
I get the gist of it later, right? Exactly. Or you just kind of hear what the pundits say later, or hear what on the Daily Show or something like that. You know what's talked about, or late night TV. It's usually where I get a lot of my political stuff. Okay, good. So yeah, so that's that chapter. These slides have been posted. Hopefully you saw. I also posted the beginning of chapter 2, which we're going to go over next. Before we do that, though, I did want to, I kind of been lecturing for a while, give you guys an opportunity to, with a case study, to just kind of talk about it again in groups, like we did before, in groups of 3 or 4, kind of how there's 2 options for the case study, but just share with your classmates which option you picked and kind of how you handled that. And then just briefly, we'll get a couple examples from the class as well before we move on to the next chapter. I'll let you guys do that. If you want to take like 10 minutes to do that, and we'll reconvene. Thanks.